Hey, payday, payday. You want payday? I know that. I got bad news for Canelo. Payday Alvarez. His opponent from May just got knocked the fuck out by a random guy with only 4 knockouts. So in this video, I'm gonna break down why this is a bad look for Canelo Alvarez. You dig? Now, before I get started with the Canelo business, you gotta know what's going on. Jaime Munguia was just knocked out by a random Frenchman who was brought in as an end of the year showcase fight. How do we know that it was a showcase fight? Well, for starters, it's a top rank fight. And just being honest, a lot of top rank, their matchmaking recently, especially, has been showcase level fights where the A side or the person, the more popular fighter, basically who's making more money, they're heavily favored to win. And then most of the time they do win. The other reason and indication is he's not too far removed from the Canelo loss that happened earlier this year in May. And he was in a situation with Golden Boy, and then he recently teamed up. So if you know how Top Rank does business, that's kind of how they do business. They get a young prospect and they kind of groom them and give them those showcase fights like Torres. You haven't really seen Torres step up and fight a Luis King Kong Ortiz or a Martin Bacoli level person. So they want to develop you. And since they got this fighter pretty much from Golden Boy, who was coming off of a loss at the time to Canelo, switching back to his trainer of Eric Morales, they gave him tune-up fights, you know? And unfortunately for Munguia, this tune-up fight, he ends up getting destroyed. But what makes matters worse is he got destroyed by a guy that, one, wasn't supposed to beat him, but a guy who on paper shouldn't have beat him. And if he did beat him, usually what you see in situations like that is if you were to lose based on the guy's lack of power on his resume and on his record, maybe controversially you lose the fight or win the fight, or you get outboxed. That's not what happened in this particular fight. And I did a full-fledged breakdown, so please check that on the channel. I am the best in the business and it's not even close. So check out my full breakdown on Munguia versus Sudase and that fight. But I'll give you some of the cliff notes here. The bottom line is it was a one-hitter quitter in a fight that Munguia was otherwise pretty much winning, but he wasn't winning going away because Sudase was definitely game and he was really trying to land some of them singles and he was just taking his time with it. They say in boxing, it's the punches you don't see that end up doing the most damage. And Munguia was so worried about his offense and getting off his combinations, especially after a second round knockdown where he knocked Sudase down. I think all of the strategy and patience, it kind of went out the window and Munguia reverted back to who he's been, which is an offensive fighter. Furthermore, the fight took place in Tijuana, where Munguia is from. So he had the hometown crowd, probably wanted to look good for his hometown crowd. And I tell you guys all the time, the quickest way to have the opposite effect is to press for a knockout. Meaning if you want to look impressive, if you want to get a knockout, the quickest way to not look impressive and or get knocked out is to push for something that's not there. Meaning you're trying to look good. You're trying too hard to look good in front of your hometown crowd, which could be a hometown hijinks because you're trying to look good. You're trying to be impressive and you want to please the crowd. You do too much and then you end up looking bad, because this kind of happened with Canelo and John Ryder where he couldn't finish the guy. And now Munguia, even worse, he goes back home to Mexico and he gets knocked out by a guy who seemingly has no power. Now, speaking of Canelo, let me connect the dots for you. Because some people are like, yo, ego, man. What does this have to do with Canelo, man? This is Munguia's problem. What it has to do with Canelo is this. I've been on record saying that Canelo is handpicking certain guys. Canelo's made a lot of money. He continues to make a lot of money. And I really believe that Canelo, he just wants to call the shots, and he's not looking for certain styles that are probably problematic. And if he does fight him, he wants to overall wait until the time is right in between fights or whenever he deems is the case, and he's just moving different. The world wants to see him fight David Benavidez, and he doesn't seem up for it. At first he was like, David Benavidez, who is he beat? You fight nobody. You fight Juan Darrell. You fight Anthony Darrell. Nobody. And he was making excuses there. Then Benavidez started saying whatever and saying yes to everybody. Fought better names like Caleb Plant, David Benavidez, ended up fighting Anthony Darrell, as well as Demetrius Andrade, a guy that, in my opinion, Canelo ducked. And when his resume started to improve, then the demands from Canelo changed. And Canelo was like, I want 150 million to fight him, which who knows if that's even feasible. And then the 150 went to, I think, as high as like 250 or 300 mil or whatever. And then, he ends up picking Munguia, and he goes the distance with Munguia. And then you have this random Frenchman who has four knockouts in 27 fights. And the random Frenchman ends up looking impressive and putting Munguia out. That looks bad for Canelo, because we know you hand selected your opponent, which people didn't even want to see you fight Munguia or Berlanga. And then these are the names that you picked, and they age like milk. As far as Berlanga, we don't really know because he hasn't been back in the ring. He's going to fight Gabe Rosado. For me, I don't know. I don't know that he would lose that fight, because Gabe Rosado was a retired fighter. He has, in his last 6 fights, he's lost 5 of them, right? He's lost 5 of his last 6 fights. I don't know if he has the power. Munguia just lost. Berlanga, he looks pretty big in his offseason. So I don't know. I don't know that Rosado can play spoiler there and beat him. But if, let's say, Berlanga were to fight the winner of Benavidez Morel, I would definitely favor the winner of that fight to beat Berlanga. So all in all, what's happening and you're seeing is everything that Boxing Ego said, little by little, is coming true in so many different cases in boxing. And I know I've said all this stuff regarding Canelo, and I took flack from it from the Canelo Cinnabons, the Chupapi Muñeños. They said, no, it couldn't be. They said I was hating this, that, and the third, but everything is now coming to pass, and the roosters are coming home. The chickens have come to roost, right? And that's the reality of it. Canelo's resume not really aging that great. You look at, he went to Mexico and fought John Ryder, couldn't stop him, even though he had I think a broken nose. Then the next fight, Golden Boy books, because he was with Golden Boy at the time, Jaime Munguia versus John Ryder. And then John Ryder gets stopped by Munguia. Munguia later goes on to fight Canelo. Canelo can't stop him as well. And then Canelo, he kind of just like tapered off in the end. He looked sharp in the beginning of the fight, kind of tapered off. And then now Munguia just lost to a guy with no power. So it's kind of making you question Canelo's power. Then you look at the Bivol fight. He lost to Bivol, and Bivol just got beat by Better Biev. They're about to run it back in February for the rematch. I still think Bivol's a quality fighter, but I'm just saying, look at all of Canelo's recent opponents. Bivol beats him. Bivol loses to a champion in Better Biev for undisputed. You have John Ryder, you go the distance with him, and then he ends up getting knocked out by Munguia. You go the distance with Munguia, and then he ends up getting knocked out by a guy with no pop with one shot. So it's now drawing questions, and now you're getting to see why Canelo has avoided David Benavidez questions in the fight in and of itself, right? That's how it's looking to me, because a lot of these wins for Canelo aren't aging well. Triple G, I mean, he was 41 years old, definitely didn't look the same, pretty much retired after that. So it kind of showed you where Triple G was at in his career. So since DAZN, he did the deal with DAZN up till now, who has Canelo really been fighting? Where's Avni Yildirim? Caleb Smith also got knocked out earlier this year in January by Beterbiev. So Beterbiev is fighting Canelo old opponents and he knocking them out. Caleb Smith went to decision. Even though he got dominated by Canelo, it still went 12. Beterbiev got in there with Canelo, his former opponent, and knocked him out in Caleb Smith. Beterbiev got in there with Bivol and he almost knocked him out, but he definitely beat him. You know what I mean? And now you have Munguia. So it's not looking good for the boy Nello.